With the new patch just dropping a few days back, some of you may be wondering what are the top junglers for SoloQ in the upcoming season. In today's video, I'm going to review to you my personal top 8 junglers for the upcoming month of January 2025. Starting at number 8, we have Julian. This magic damage fighter has fallen a bit in the meta, but is still pretty strong in the jungle. With the ability to unlock his full kit by level 3, he's able to gank much earlier than most other junglers and create an early snowball. This makes his early to mid game potential strong, as he has so much gank potential when enemies are still isolated in their lanes. However, Julian loses a bit of his shine in the late game when enemies are more grouped up. This is mostly due to his kit requiring him to commit if he wants to do damage. His skill 1 combo doesn't have great range and has limited AoE, and if you have committed to a close range combo, it would mean your skill 2 is on cooldown, leaving you with no escape options. This limits his options in the late game, especially if you didn't snowball and cause the enemies to be underfed. Nonetheless, you can still abuse the immunity windows when using his enhanced skill 2 combos to weave in and out of fights, dealing damage and then quickly getting out and dodging skills. I also should mention that his burst potential is still there, and he can quickly eliminate squishies if they wander too near. In terms of objectives, Julian doesn't really have the kit to control the area, which really makes him just okay in terms of contesting objectives. His mobility is good but not insane, which limits his split push potential, but enhanced skill 2 can still be abused to get out of sticky situations. And now, here is a general build that I recommend on Julian. Penetration works really well since you can trigger easy stacks on Genius 1 with his multi-hit skills. We then have Blood Wings for more mobility, Feather of Heaven for more DPS, and Holy Crystal gives a huge damage boost. You can swap out Genius 1 for Divine Glaive in the late game if enemies are building high magic defenses. As with all builds that I will recommend on this video, do understand that it is a general build and you are free to adjust it to the situation. Up next, sneaking in at number 7, we have the Master of Shadows, Hayabusa. Some of you may be wondering why Hayabusa isn't higher on this list given that he's banned so often. Well, my reasoning for this is that he has simple spell and item counters. An enemy can time a flicker during his ult to get out of it. They can also use Wind of Nature or Winter Crown to become immune to part of it. That's it, Hayabusa is still really strong right now. His ganking potential is really great from early to mid thanks to his powerful skill 2 shadows and ult giving him excellent mobility, immunity, and damage. If you are able to get a snowball going, he's really difficult to stop. The issues start to arise during the late game, when the enemy buys counter items and also starts to group up. This massively impacts the effectiveness of your ult as they will be able to share damage or be immune to it. However, as Hayabusa's skill 2 offers good mobility, he does have good split pushing potential if you find yourself not that useful in teamfights. In terms of neutral objective control, Hayabusa really isn't that great as he doesn't have much sustain and is really squishy. You really need your team's help for lots, especially those after 12 minutes, or you'll be taking a whole lot of damage while soloing those. However, once again, thanks to his skill 2, you also have great stealing potential, especially now that Hayabusa can cast Retry even while ulting. This gives you an immunity window for a sneaky steal before escaping. And now, here is a general build for Hayabusa. Hunter Strike and Blade of Heptasis offers excellent flat physical penetration during the early to mid stages to really punish squishy targets. And Malefic Roar adds on to that with percentage penetration. We can then maximize the damage with Blade of Despair. Next, coming up at number 6, we have arguably the fastest farming jungler on the list, Nolan. With insane clear speed, Nolan can speedrun the early phase of the game and gank faster than almost every jungler. Combined with superb burst damage, you're almost guaranteed the first blood if things go smoothly. Aside from Fanny, Nolan probably has the best early to mid game potential of any jungler thanks to this. With that said, Nolan does suffer a bit in the late game, as he's always exposed when going in for combos. Nolan is really weak to CCs, which means that he really needs an opening during larger team fights. And since he's so squishy, he can also be bursted down quite easily if you're not careful. But as he can spam his skill 2 for mobility, he still has decent split push potential as an option. Although similar to Hayabusa in that his combo can be avoided with Flicker, Wind of Nature, and Winter Crown, Nolan's burst combo is so fast that it will take some impressive reaction time in order to avoid it. Adding to that, his ult cooldown is much faster than Hayabusa, so you can try it again on the same target while your enemy's counter options are on cooldown. In terms of objective control, Nolan doesn't really have the kit, similar with most assassins to control the area. But what Nolan has going for him is that he does solid damage and can do turtles and lords fast. This allows him to quickly rush objectives when it's available, even when he's solo. But make sure that it's a good opportunity as you will still take a lot of damage, especially for lords after 12 minutes. The recommended build for Nolan is going for penetration to maximize his damage, and is similar to the build with Hayabusa. Our next jungler in the number 5 spot is Alpha, and he's quite different from the rest on this list so far. While the other heroes on this list so far are assassins or have that playstyle, Alpha is a sustained fighter who fights more honestly and in your face. He has a very simple kit that anyone can play as long as you know how to press buttons. The key here is really about playing him enough to get acquainted with how much he can tank and sustain. While most assassins struggle with tanky heroes as they lack the sustained DPS to finish them off, Alpha packs plenty of true damage in his kit that ignores defense entirely, allowing him to thrive against tanky enemies. And in solo queue, this comes in handy when you oftentimes have to rely on yourself to deal with invading roamers and EXP laners who harass you in the jungle. However, Alpha's honest playstyle is also his disadvantage. Because of his lack of mobility, he is quite limited to just walking up to enemies and having to go all in with his ult. This can be a struggle, especially in the late game when enemies bunch up and can burst you down quickly before you can heal back up with your attacks. But with a snowball going, Alpha can go 1v3 or even against the entire enemy team thanks to his amazing sustain. When it comes to objectives, Alpha can hold lots really easily and can even solo once again thanks to his sustain capabilities. His ult having a dash and knock up also helps get in quickly if you need to and can CC the enemy jungle, giving you a window to cast your retreat before them. But due to his lack of mobility, split pushing is not always an option and usually a big risk. With Alpha, I like to play him with a tanky sustain build, and here is one that I often use. Each of these items provide cooldown reduction to enable a skill spammy playstyle, while also providing you with a ton of sustain and damage. Dancing in at the number 4 spot, we have the cute but deadly Leonin, Joy. Her power lies mostly in her mobility and being a magic damage dealer. With a decent early to mid game, she really starts to shine when you're able to farm up as she scales incredibly well into the late game. Dealing with a late game fully itemized Joy is truly terrifying, thanks to her amazing burst potential and mobility. One of the main problems with playing Joy in solo queue, however, is that oftentimes you will want minions or creeps to stack up a couple of beats first before going into a fight. The issue is when teammates clear off those resources without understanding that you need them to do so. This forces you to take more risks as you might need to find those beats in the middle of hectic fights, putting you at risk of being CC'd in the middle of them and stopping your combo. Despite that, Joy is still a powerhouse and difficult to deal with in the hands of a good player. She can easily penetrate into the backline in the right conditions and quickly burst down opposing squishies within seconds. Being a magic damage dealer, Wind of Nature is not a problem for you, which is a very common item for enemy marksmen to build to counter physical type assassins. Joy can hold her own quite well in objective contests, as her amazing damage allows you to take lots quickly. Although similar to Nolan, you will take quite a bit of damage doing it solo, so you'll still want teammates to help if possible. Her amazing mobility allows you to steal quite effectively too if you're playing from behind, and also gives her great split push potential. Here is my typical build on Joy. The early Genius Wand helps with early game snowballing and is very effective against squishy targets. Winter Crown is especially effective as you can cast it to become completely immune even while your ult is still active. Again, you can swap out Genius Wand for Divine Glaive in the late game if enemies are building high magic defenses. Next up, we have Bane, who marches in as the third best jungler on our list. This might come as a surprise to many, but just let me explain the Octopus Captain's high placement. While Bane is not as flashy as the other heroes so far, he is really quite effective. He has solid clear speed, high burst damage, and his enhanced basic attack helps to deal with tanky targets due to its HP % damage. More importantly, Bane is fantastic in this meta due to his ult having an essential knockup while also packing solid burst damage. Having his high impact ult available really helps to control those diving assassins for that split second, and the burst that Bane packs can finish them off very quickly. His late game scaling is also quite amazing. Going for a physical build gives you access to a deceptively long range skill 1 that hits extremely hard and can really surprise the enemy backline. The magic build is also great with sustain, but is not as comfortable due to the short range of skill 2. His early to mid is also decent, and it helps that he has solid clear speed to help gank quickly. When it comes to objective contesting, Bane does quite well since his ult can quite effectively zone a large area. Skill 2 helps to keep your health topped up, while your high damage allows you to take lots quickly. One of the best things about Bane is also his high turret damage, especially with his enhanced basic attacks. This makes him quite a split pushing monster, but his lack of mobility does hinder him in that respect. Normally, I go for a physical Bane build, so this is one I would recommend. Starting on Hunter Strike gives a solid early game power spike, and immediately going to Blade of Despair helps to reduce his skill 1 cooldown a lot while adding a bunch of damage. Flying in at number 2, it shouldn't come as a surprise that Fanny is rated so highly. However, there is a large asterisk next to this one, as Fanny is only really this good if you are highly skilled with her. I've been saying for a long time that Fanny is the top jungler in the game, but it's only when the pros started banning Fanny en masse in tournaments that the community at large finally admitted to this. With absolutely unmatched mobility, Fanny is the true personification of an assassin. Her ability to get in and out of fights is second to none, which is what really defines her playstyle. There is no other hero that outshines her in slicing up squishy targets, and this is what gives her the edge out of the many other junglers that could have made it to this list. Fanny's early game is probably the strongest on this list as long as you can get to level 2. She's able to already start ganking at that point, although it really depends on the situation. Due to her insane mobility, no lane is safe as long as Fanny is missing on the map, which is one thing that makes her so strong. Her mere presence, or the lack thereof, can already cause enemies to play unnecessarily safe just so they don't expose themselves to a sudden gank. In the late game, Fanny becomes more limited as she is really squishy and can be bursted easily if caught. However, her crazy mobility easily makes her one of the best split pushers in the game. She can easily split push at one moment and then join the teamfight late to finish off escaping targets. With that said, Fanny is still very susceptible to invades. And in solo queue, you can't always rely on your team to assist you. Without the blue buff, Fanny is like a bird with injured wings. She can still fly, but not as high. And in a bad team, you might find yourself starved throughout the game against a good enemy team. Fanny isn't really an objective contesting type of jungler, and is quite reliant on the team when taking objectives due to her lack of sustain and DPS. However, her insane mobility does help her with stealing and getting out quite easily, which does prevent enemies from ever doing them safely. Fanny's build is quite similar to that of Hayabusa and Nolan, being a physical type assassin. You just want to focus on penetration for maximum burst potential. If you find yourself being heavily targeted, you could go for 2 defensive items in the last 2 slots and still have sufficient damage to burst squishies. And finally, we arrive at the throne of the king. The number 1 jungler in the current metagame is none other than the deadly exorcist himself, Suyo. With an amazing kit packed with CC, range, mobility, damage, sustain, and even an execute ability, Suyo is nothing short of fantastic as a jungler. Similar to Julian, Suyo unlocks all his skills by level 3, enabling him to gank earlier than most junglers. This allows him to snowball much earlier and invade if there's an opportunity. His mobility allows him to breeze through the jungle, giving him one of the fastest clear speeds in the game, and therefore is one of the best junglers in the early to mid game as well. In the late game, Suyo is not as limited as the other assassins, as he's not exactly forced into all-in commitments on targets. His charged skill tree has a low cooldown and solid damage, enabling him to act almost like a physical mage that can poke down targets from range. You can basically keep doing this and keep it non-committal until a chance presents itself. His great mobility also allows him to split push quite effectively. When it comes to objective contests, it's difficult to keep Suyo from stealing the objective thanks to his great entry with skill 1 and great secure potential with his bursty skill 2 retry combo. But when you're not trying to steal, Suyo also has decent sustain and damage against lords. Thanks to his skill 2 retry combo, he's probably the best objective securer in the game at this moment in time. I have been spamming Suyo a lot in my games, and here is my recommended build. Hunter Strike early provides a great power spike in the early stages, and then War Axe will add to your sustain. Blade of Despair adds plenty of damage as well as even more damage reduction in your immortal form, and then finishing off with Malefic Roar to better deal with defenses in the late game. And that's it folks, that's my top 8 junglers in the current meta as of January of 2025. Do you think any junglers are better than those in the list, or do you agree with it? If you think that I missed any, let me know in the comments below. I hope the video has been helpful to you for picking a hero to jungle. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.